Hello there. Welcome to the stream. My name is Sun Albionus. The past many streams we've been reading through the Iliad by Homer, as translated by Alexander Pope. We are now at chapter 21. Achilles has finally joined the battle after sulking much for many chapters, and this chapter details his great onslaught, which takes him even into the river. He upsets the river itself. You may have noticed that I'm streaming at a rather odd hour at the moment. It's been busy lately. I've had builders around the house, which has been quite a nuisance. So we are at this odd hour, and hopefully all will be fine. We have this nice picture here, which I do hope is a good resolution. I'm actually going to open my own stream just to check really quickly, because it's I might be able to zoom out a little. I think. Let me have a quick look. It's a difficult image. Let's have a look. How does that look? Maybe it's got a little bit further, actually. Hello, Rua. Welcome to the stream. It's a bit of an odd hour today. Oh, that might work. What does this look like? I look at it on my own stream. It's got a particular texture to it, to the grain, that makes it look bad at specific angles. I think that'll do. I'll leave it like that. Yeah, so I was just saying it's a bit of a strange hour, sort of busy stuff going on IRL, the builders around the house and stuff, so I wasn't able to stream earlier. But here we are. One moment, I've just got to blow my nose. There we go. We are back. Let's have a look. What are we up to? Getting really near the end of this book now. I think it's 24 chapters, I believe. Little books. And this is number 21, so 22, 23, 24. I think there's a lot to cover in the last few chapters, so I assume that the last few are going to be really exciting. You know, we've got the death of Hector, the funeral games, the begging of Priam. Exciting stuff. So hopefully it'll be exciting. Let's see. I turn down my own headphones a little. They're a bit too loud. I can't hear myself think. Book 21. The Battle in the River Scamander. The Trojans fly before Achilles, some towards the town, others towards the river Scamander. He falls upon the latter with great slaughter, takes 12 captives alive to sacrifice to the shade of Patroclus, and kills Lycaon and Asteropaeus. Scamander attacks him with all his waves. Neptune and Pallas assist the hero. Simoeus joins Scamander. At length, Vulcan, by the instigation of Juno, almost dries up the river. This combat ended. The other gods engage each other. Meanwhile, Achilles continues the slaughter, drives the rest into Troy. Aegina only makes a stand and is conveyed away in a cloud by Apollo, who, to delude Achilles, takes upon him Aegina's shape, and, while he pursues him in that disguise, gives the Trojans an opportunity of retiring into their city. The same day continues. The scene is on the banks and in the stream of Scamander. It's a funny coincidence, actually. I was reading. I've been also reading through Herodotus' book in my own time, the histories of Herodotus, where he details the Persian wars, and they mention the river Scamander as they're sort of describing Xerxes going from Persia over to Greece through the Hellespont and all that, which is really quite close to Troy, I believe. I think so. Yeah, I think it is. And they mention the river Scamander. And it's interesting, they mention how at least during those times, its size would vary throughout the year. Sometimes it would be really quite an impressive river and you wouldn't cross it very easily, and other times it would be merely 3 foot deep, as it seems to be in this painting, to the point where this picture here could be just him wading across the waters. And reading the little summary introduction of this chapter, it mentions how Vulcan nearly dries up the river. I wonder if there is a bit of historical play there, where while this fight will describe a single day, perhaps it is in actuality talking of a fight that took place over many months, as it goes through the seasons when the river is high and unpassable, and it gets lower and lower and lower as the fight goes on until it's almost completely dried out, which they attribute to the bodies, but it was actually perhaps just the seasons of the rivers rising and falling. I wonder, because you get a lot of that stuff in mythology. You know, there's a lot of the stories which describe really quite natural events, just in really quite poetic ways. I wonder. I do indeed. But let's enough faffing about. Let's get into it and see what we have in store with our boy Achilles. Oh, I better close my own stream, otherwise I'll have no bandwidth left. There we go. Okay. And now to Xanthus' gliding stream they drove. Xanthus, am I thinking of... No, it's not. No, I was thinking of Xuthus, never mind. Xanthus, immortal progeny of Jove. The river here divides the flying train. Parts to the town fly diverse over the plain, where late their troops triumphant bore the fight, now chased and trembling in ignoble flight. These with gathered mist Saturnia shrouds, and rolls behind the rout a heap of clouds. Parts plunge into the stream, old Xanthus roars, the flashing billows beat the whitened shores. With cries promiscuous all the banks resound, and here and there in eddies whirling round, the flouncing steeds and shrieking warriors drowned. As the scorched locusts from their fields retire, while fast behind them runs the blaze of fire, driven from the land before the smoky cloud, the clustering legions flush into the flood. So plunged in Xanthus by Achilles' force, roars the resounding surge with men and horse. His bloody lance the hero casts aside, which spreading tamarisks on the margin hide. Then, like a god, the rapid billows braves, armed with his sword, high brandished over the waves. Now down he plunges, now he whirls it round. Deep groan the waters with the dying sound. Repeated wounds the reddening river dyed, and the warm purple circled on the tide. Swift through the foamy flood the Trojans fly, and close in rocks or winding caverns lie. So the huge dolphin, tempesting the main, in shoals before him fly the scaly train. Confusedly heaped, they seek their innermost caves, or pant and heave beneath the floating waves. Now tired with slaughter from the Trojan band, 12 chosen youths he drags alive to land. With their rich belts, their captive arms constrains, late their proud ornaments, but now their chains. These his attendants to the ships conveyed, sad victims destined to Patroclus' shade. Then, as once more he plunged amid the flood, the young Laocoon in his passage stood, the son of Priam, whom the heroes hand, but late made captive in his father's land. As from a sycamore his sounding steel lopped the green arms to spoke a chariot wheel. To Lemnos' isle he sold the royal slave, where Jason's son the price demanded gave. But kind Eteon, touching on the shore, the ransomed prince to fair Arisbe bore. 10 days were past since his father's reign, he felt the sweets of liberty again. The next, that god whom men in vain would withstand, gives the same youth to the same conquering hand. But one moment, it's rather hot in here. I need to take off my coat. A bit toasty. I had the heating on a little too much today. Gives the same youth the same conquering hand, and I need to drink some water as well. Many distractions today. All right. Now never to return, and doomed to go a sadder journey to the shades below. His well-known face, when great Achilles eyed, the helm and visor he had cast aside, with wild affright, and dropped upon the field his useless lance and unavailing shield. As trembling, panting from the stream he fled, and knocked his faltering knees, the hero said, "Ye mighty gods, what wonders strike my view? Is it in vain our conquering arms subdue? Sure I shall see you, heaps of Trojans killed, rise from the shade and brave me on the field, as now the captive, whom so late I bound, and sold to Lemnos, stalks on Trojan ground. Not him the sea's unmeasured deeps detain, that bar such numbers from their native plain. Lo, he returns, try then, my flying spear, try if the grave can withhold the wanderer. If earth at length this active prince can seize, earth whose strong grasp has held down Hercules." Thus, while he spake, the Trojan, pale with fears, approached and sought his knees with suppliant tears. Loath as he was to yield his youthful breath, and his soul shivering at the approach of death. Achilles raised the spear, prepared to wound. He kissed his feet, extended on the ground, and while above the spear suspended stood, longing to dip its thirsty point in blood. One hand embraced them close, one stopped the dart, while thus these melting words attempt his heart. "Thy well-known captive, great Achilles, see once more Lycaons trembles at thy knee. Some pity to a suppliant's name afford, who shares the gifts of Ceres at thy board, whom late thy conquering arms to Lemnos bore, far from his father, friends, and native shore. 100 oxen were his price that day, now sums immense thy mercy shall repay. Scarce respited from woes I yet appear, and scarce 12 morning suns have seen me here. Lo, Jove again submits me to thy hands, again her victim cruel fate demands. I sprung from Priam and Lauphaea's fairs, old Altes, daughter and Lelagia's heir, who held in Pedasus his famed abode, and ruled the fields where silver Saturnio flowed. 2 sons, alas, unhappy sons she bore. For one spear shall drink each brother's gore. And I succeeded to slaughter Polydore. How from that arm of terror shall I fly? Some demon urges, 'tis my doom to die. If ever yet soft pity touched thy mind, think not me too much of Hector's kind. Not the same mother gave thy suppliant breath with his who wrought thy loved Patroclus' death. These words, attended with a shower of tears, the youth addressed to unrelenting ears. Talk not of life or ransom, he replies. Patroclus dead, whoever meets me dies. In vain a single Trojan sues for grace, but least the sons of Priam's hateful race. Die then, my friend, what boots it to deplore? The great, the good, Patroclus is no more. He, far thy better, was foredoomed to die. And thou, dost thou bewail mortality? Seest thou not me, whom nature's gifts adorn, sprung from a hero, from a goddess born? The day shall come, which nothing can avert, when by the spear, the arrow, or the dart, by night or day, by force or by design, impending death and certain fate are mine. Die then, he said, and as the word he spoke, the fainting stripling sunk before the stroke. His hand forgot its grasp, and left the spear, while all his trembling frame confessed his fear. Sudden Achilles his broadsword displayed, and buried his neck the reeking blade. Prone fell the youth, and panting on the land, the gushing purple dyed the thirsty stand. The victor to the stream the carcass gave, and thus insults him, floating on the wave. Lie there, Laucaon, let the fish surround thy bloated corse, and suck thy gory wound. There no sad mother shall thy funerals weep, but swift Scamander roll thee to the deep, whose every wave some watery monster brings, to feast unpunished on the fat of kings. So perish Troy and all the Trojan line, such ruin theirs, and such compassion mine. What boots ye now Scamander's worshipped stream, his heavenly honours and immortal name? In vain your immolated bulls are slain, your living coursers glut his gulfs in vain. Thus he rewards you with this bitter fate. Thus till the Grecian vengeance is complete. Thus is atoned Patroclus' honoured shade, and the short absence of Achilles paid. These boastful words provoke the raging god. With fury swells the violated flood. What means divine may yet the power employ to check Achilles and to rescue Troy? Meanwhile the hero springs in arms, to dare the great Asteropaeus to mortal war, the son of Pelagon, whose lofty line flows from the source of Axius' stream divine. Fair Peribaea love the god had crowned, with all his reluctant refluent waters circled round. On him Achilles rushed, he fearless stood, and shook two spears advancing from the flood. The flood impelled him on Pelides' head to avenge his waters, choked with heaps of dead. Near as they draw, Achilles thus began, What art thou, boldest of the race of man? Who, or from whence, unhappy is the sire, whose son encounters our resistless ire? O son of Peleus, what avails to trace, replied the warrior, our illustrious race? From rich Pannonia's valleys I command, armed with pretended spears, my native band. Now shines the 10th bright morning since I came in aid of Ilion to the fields of fame. Axius, who swells with all the neighbouring rills, and wide around the floated region fills, begot my sire, whose spear such glory won. Now lift thy arm and try that hero's son. Threatening, he said, the hostile chief's advance. At once Asteropaeus discharged each lance. For both his dexterous hands the lance could wield. One struck but pierced not the Vulcanian shield. One raised Achilles' hand, the spouting blood spun forth in earth with a fastened weapon stood. Like lightning next the Pelian javelin flies, its erring fury hissed along the skies. Deep in the swelling bank was driven the spear, even to the middle earth, and quivered there. Then from his side the sword Pelides drew, and on his foe with double fury flew. The foe thrice tugged and shook the rooted wood, repulsive of his might the weapon stood. The fourth he tries to break the spear in vain, best as he stands he tumbles to the plain. His belly opened with a ghastly wound, the reeking entrails pour upon the ground. Beneath the hero's feet he panting lies, and his eye darkens and his spirit flies. While the proud victor thus triumphing said, his radiant armour tearing from the dead. So ends thy glory, such the fates they prove, who strive presumptuous with the sons of Jove. Sprung from a river didst thou boast thy line, but great Saturnius is the source of mine. How durst thy vaunt thy watery progeny? Of Peleus, Aeacus, and Jove am I, the race of thee superior far to those, as he that thunders to the stream that flows. What rivers can Scamander might have shown, but Jove he dreads nor wars against his son. Even Achilles might contend in vain, and all the roaring billows of the main. The eternal ocean from whose fountains flow the seas, the rivers, and the springs below. The thundering voice of Jove abhors to hear, and in his deep abyss shakes with fear. He said, then from the bank his javelin tore, and left the breathless warrior in his gore. The floating tides the bloody carcass lave, and beat against it wave succeeding wave. 'Tis rolled between the banks, it lies the food of curling eels and fishes of the flood. All scattered round the stream, their mightiest slain, the amazed Paeonians scour along the plain. He vents his fury on the flying crew. Thracius, Asteropylus, and Menessus slew. Mydon, Pharsilocus, and Aeneas flew. That's a different Aeneas, that's Aeneas. And numbers more his lance had plunged to hell, but from the bottom of his gulfs profound Scamander spoke. The shores returned the sound. O first of mortals, for the gods are thine, in valour matchless and in force divine. If Jove had given thee every Trojan head, 'tis not on me thy rage should heap the dead. See, my choked streams no more their course can keep, nor roll their wonted tribute to the deep. Turn then, impetuous, from our injured flood. Content, thy slaughters could amaze a god. In human form confessed before his eyes, the river thus, and thus the chief replies. O sacred stream, thy word we shall obey, but not till Troy the destined vengeance pay, nor till within her towers the perjured train shall pant and tremble at our arms again. Not till proud Hector, guardian of her wall, or stain this lance, or see Achilles fall. He said, and drove with fury on the foe. Then to the godhead of the silver bow the yellow flood began. O son of Jove, was not the mandate of the sire above full and express, that Phoebus should employ his sacred arrows in defence of Troy, and make her conquer till Hyperion's fall, in awful darkness hide the face of all? He spoke in vain, the chief without dismay ploughs through the boiling surge his desperate way. Then, rising in his rage above the shores, from all his deep the bellowing river roars. Huge heaps of slain disgorges on the coast, and round the banks the ghastly dead are tossed, while all before the billows ranged on high, a watery bulwark, screen the bands who fly. Now bursting on his head the thundering sound, the falling deluge whelms the hero round. His loaded shield bends to the rushing tide, his feet upborne scarce the strong flood divide. Sliddering and staggering on the border stood a spreading elm that overhung the flood. He seized a bending bow, his steps to stay. The plants uprooted to his weight gave way. Heaving the bank and undermining all, loud flashed the waters to the rushing fall. Of thick foliage the large trunk displayed, bridged the rough flood across, the hero stayed on this his weight, and raised upon his hand, leaped from the channel and regained the land. Then blackened the wild waves, the murmur rose, the god pursues, a huger billow throws, and bursts the bank, ambitious to destroy the man whose fury is the fate of Troy. He, like the warlike eagle, speeds his pace, swiftest and strongest of the aerial race. Far as a spear can fly, Achilles springs, at every bound the clanging armour rings. Now here, now there, he turns on every side, and winds his course before the following tide. The waves flow after, wheresoever he wills, and gather fast and murmur at his heels. So, when a peasant to his garden brings soft rills of water from the bubbling springs, and calls the floods from high to bless his bowers, and feed with pregnant streams the plants and flowers, soon as he clears whatever their passage stays, and marks the future currents with his spade, swift over the rolling pebbles, down the hills, louder and louder purl the falling rills. Before him scattering, they prevent his pains, and shine in many wanderings over the plains. I need to drink some water. This is an intense chapter. I've always liked this chapter. How Achilles dares to fight the god of the river itself. Still flies Achilles, but before his eyes still swift Scamander rolls wherever he flies. Not all his speed escapes the rapid floods, the first of men, but not a match for gods. Oft as he turned the torrent to oppose, and bravely try if all the powers were foes, so oft the surge, in watery mountains spread, beats on his back and bursts upon his head. Yet dauntless still the adverse flood he braves, and still indignant bounds above the waves. Tired by the tides, his knees relax with toil, washed from beneath him slides the slimy soil. When thus, his eyes on heaven's expansion thrown, forth bursts the hero with an angry groan. Is there no god Achilles to befriend? No power to avert his miserable end? Prevent, O Jove, this ignominious state, and make my future life the sport of fate. of all heaven's oracles believed in vain, but most of Thetis must her son complain. By Phobos' dart she prophesied my fall, in glorious arms before the Trojan wall. Oh, had I died in fields of battle warm, stretched like a hero by a hero's arm, might Hector's spear this dauntless bosom rend, and my swift soul overtake my slaughtered friend. Ah no, Achilles meets a shameful fate. Oh, how unworthy of the brave and great. Like some vile swain, who on a rainy day, crossing a ford, the torrent sweeps away, an unregarded carcass to the sea. Neptune and Pallas haste to his relief, and thus in human form address the chief, the power of ocean first. Forbear thy fear, O son of Peleus. Lo, thy gods appear. Behold, from Jove's descending to thy aid, propitious Neptune and the blue-eyed maid. Stay, and the furious flood shall cease to rave. 'Tis not thy fate to glut his angry wave. But thou, the counsel heaven suggests attend, nor breathe from combat, nor thy sword suspend, till Troy receive her flying sons, till all her routed squadrons pant behind their wall. Hector alone shall stand his fatal chance, and Hector's blood shall smoke upon thy lance. Thine is the glory doomed, thus spake the gods. Then swift ascended to the bright abodes, stung with new ardour, thus by heaven impelled, he springs impetuous and invades the field. Over all the expanded plain the waters spread, heaved on the bounding billows danced the dead, floating amidst the scattered arms, while casques of gold and turned up bucklers glittered as they rolled. High over the surging tide, by leaps and bounds, he wades and mounts, the parted wave resounds. Not a whole river stops the hero's course, while Pallas fills him with immortal force. With equal rage indignant Xanthus roars, and lifts his bellows and overwhelms his shores. Then thus to Simoeus, haste, my brother flood, and check the... Wait, hang on. Then thus to Simoeus, I think this is Scamander talking, yeah. Haste, my brother flood, and check this mortal that controls a god, our bravest hero, else shall quit the fight, and Ilion tumble from her towery height. Cool then thy subject streams, and bid them roar. From all thy fountains swell thy watery store, with broken rocks and with a load of dead. Charge the black surge and pour it on his head. Mark how resistless through the floods he goes, and boldly bids the warring gods he be foes. But nor that force, nor form divine to sight, shall aught avail him, if our rage unite. Whelmed under our dark goals these arms shall lie, that blaze so dreadful in each Trojan eye. And deep beneath a sandy mountain hurled, and deep beneath a sandy mountain hurled, immersed remain this terror of the world. Such ponderous ruin shall confound the place, no Greek shall ever his perished relics grace, no hand his bones shall gather or inhume, these his cold rites, and this his watery tomb. He said, and on the chief descends amain, increased with gore and swelling with the sweat slain. Then, murmuring from his beds, he toils, he raves, and a foam whitens on the purple waves. At every step before Achilles stood, the crimson surge and deluged him with blood. Fear touched the queen of heaven, she saw dismayed, she called aloud and summoned Vulcan's aid. Rise to the war, the insulting flood requires thy wasteful arm, assemble all thy fires, while to their aid, by our command enjoined, rush the swift eastern and the western wind. These from old ocean at my word shall blow. Pour the red torrents on the watery foe. Courses and arms to one bright ruin turn, and hissing rivers to their bottoms burn. Go, mighty in thy rage, display thy power, drink the whole flood, and crackling trees devour. Scorch all the banks, and to our voice reclaim, exert thy unwearied furies of the flame. The power ignipotent her word obeys. Wide over the plain he pours the boundless blaze. At once consumes the dead and dries the soil, and the shrunk waters in their channel boil. As when autumnal Boreas sweeps the sky, and instant blows the watered gardens dry, so looked the field, so whitened was the ground, while Vulcan breathed the fiery blast around. Swift on the sedgy reeds the ruin preys, along the margin winds the running blaze. The trees in flaming rows to ashes turn, the flowery lotos and the tamarisk burn. Broad elm and cypresses rising in a spire, the watery willows hiss before the fire. Now glows the waves, the fishes pant for breath, the eels lie, twisting in the pangs of death. Now flounce aloft, now dive the scaly fry, or gasping turn their bellies to the sky. At length the river reared his languid head, and thus short panting to the god he said, "O Vulcan, oh what power resists thy might? I faint, I sink, unequal to the fight. I yield, let Iliad fall if fate's decree. Ah, bend no more thy fiery arms on me." He ceased, while conflagration blazing round, the bubbling waters yield a hissing sound, as when the flames beneath a cauldron rise, to melt the fat of some rich sacrifice. Amid the fierce embrace of circling fires, the waters foam, the heavy smoke aspires. So boiled the imprisoned flood, forbid to flow, and choked with vapours, feels his bottom glow. To Juno then, imperial queen of air, the burning river sends his earnest prayer. And I'll drink some water again. Where? Ah, why, Saturnia, must thy son engage me, only me, with all his wasteful rage? On other gods his dreadful arms employ, for mightier gods assert the cause of Troy. Submissive I desist if thou command, but withdraw this all-destroying hand. Hear then my solemn oath, to yield to fate, unaided Ilion and her destined state, till Greece shall gird her with destructive flame, and in one ruin sink the Trojan name. His warm entreaty touched Saturnia's ear. She bid the ignipotent his rage forbear. Recall the flame, nor in immortal cause infest a god the obedience flame withdraws. Again the branching streams begin to spread, and soft remurmur in their wonted bed. While these by Juno's will the strife resign, the warring gods in fierce contention join. Rekindling rage each heavenly breast alarms, with horrid clangour shook the ethereal arms. Heaven in loud thunder bids the trumpets sound, and wide beneath them groans the rending ground. Jove as his sport the dreadful scene descries, and views contending gods with careless eyes. The power of battles lifts his brazen spear, and first assaults the radiant queen of war. What moved thy madness thus to disunite ethereal minds and mix all heaven in fight? What wonder this, when in thy frantic mood thou drovest a mortal to insult a god? Thy impious hand Tydeus' javelin bore, and madly bathed it in celestial gore. He smote and smote the loud resounding shield, which bears Jove's thunder on its dreadful field. The adamantine aegis of her sire, that turns the glancing bolt and forked fire. Then heaved the goddess in her mighty hand a stone, the limit of the neighbouring land, there fixed from the eldest times, black, craggy and vast. This at the heavenly homicide she cast. Thundering he falls, a mass of monstrous size, and 7 broad acres covers as he lies. The stunning stroke his stubborn nerves unbound, loud over the fields his ringing arms resound. The scornful dame her conquest views with smiles, and glorying thus the prostrate god reviles. Hast thou not yet, insatiate fury, known how far Minerva's force transcends thy own? Juno, whom thou rebellious darest withstand, corrects thy folly thus by Pallas' hand. Thus meets thy broken faith with just disgrace, and partial aid to Troy's perfidious race. The goddess spoke, and turned her eyes away, that beaming round diffused celestial day. Jove's Cyprian daughter, Cyprian daughter, stooping on the land, lent to the wounded god her tender hand. Slowly he rises, scarcely breathes with pain, and propped on her fair arm forsakes the plain. This the bright empress of the heavens surveyed, and scoffing thus to the war's victorious maid. Lo, what an aid on Mars' side is seen, the smiles and love's unconquerable queen. Mark with what insolence in open view she moves, let Pallas, if she dares, pursue. Minerva, smiling, heard, the pair overtook, and slightly on her breast the wanton struck. She, unresisting, fell, her spirits fled, on earth together the lovers spread. And like these heroes be fate of all, Minerva cries. What am I reading here? And like these heroes be the fate of all, Minerva cries, who guard the Trojan wall. To Grecian gods such let the Phrygian be, so dread, so fierce as Venus is to me. Then from the lowest stone shall Troy be moved. Thus she and Juno with a smile approved, meantime to mix in more than mortal fight. The god of ocean dares the god of light. What sloth has seized us when the fields around ring with conflicting powers, and heaven returns the sound? Shall Ignominious with shine retire, no deed performed to our Olympian sire? Come, these were the gods speaking, I didn't even know. Come, prove thy arm, for first the war to wage suits not my greatness or superior age. Rash as thou art to prop the Trojan throne, forgetful of my wrongs and of thy own, and guard the race of proud Laomedon. Hast thou forgot how at the monarch's prayer we shared the lengthened labours of a year? Troy's walls I raised, for such were Jove's commands, and yon proud bulwarks grew beneath my hands. Oh, side note here is a funny bit of mythology. Is if I've got it right, Poseidon and Apollo at one point were sent in exile, where they had to serve under a mortal king for a year as punishment. In that time, they built the walls of Troy, which is an amusing story. I can't imagine Poseidon and Apollo, two mighty gods, sitting there doing some bricklaying. That's rather amusing. Troy's walls I raised, for such were Jove's commands, and yon proud bulwarks grew beneath my hands. Thy task it was to feed the bellowing droves along fair Ida's vales and pendant groves. But when the circling seasons in their train brought back the grateful day that crowned our pain, with menace stern, the fraudful king defied our latent godhood, and the prize denied. Mad as he was, he threatened servile bands, and doomed us exiles far in barbarous lands. Incensed, we heavenward fled with swiftest wing, and destined vengeance on the perjured king. Dost thou for this afford proud Ilion grace, and not, like us, infest the faithless race? Like us, their presence the future sons destroy, and from its deep foundations heave their Troy. Apollo thus. Yeah, exactly. It's so amusing. Like, you just imagine these literal gods sitting there. You know, they've got their trowel, they've got the mortar, putting the things on. Poseidon comes up and he says, "What is this? What is this? These are not lying. You know, you got to set your strings right. You know, he's banging on the hammer. You know, he says, you know, you got to put the mortar on the brick like this, so you get a good suction on it. You know, and he's like, I'm a god. I play the harp. I've got a bow and arrow." Oh dear. Apollo thus. To combat for mankind ill suits the wisdom of celestial mind. For what is man? Calamitous by birth. They owe their life and nourishment to earth. Like yearly leaves that now with beauty crowned, smile on the sun, now wither on the ground. To their own hands commit the frantic scene, nor mix immortals in a cause so mean. Then turns his face, far beaming heavenly fires, and from the senior power submiss retires. Him thus retreating, Artemis upbraids, the quivered huntress of the Sylvian shades. And is it thus the youthful Phobos flies, and yields to ocean's hoary sire the prize? How vain that martial pomp, and the dreadful show of pointed arrows and the silver bow! Now boast no more in yon celestial bower, thy force can match the great earth-shaking power. Silent he heard the queen of woods upbraid, not so Saturnia bore the vaunting maid, but furious thus. This is a funny scene here. Where is it? Oh, I don't know, I've lost my line. But furious thus. What insolence has driven thy pride to face the majesty of heaven? What, though by Jove the female plague designed, fierce to the feeble race of womankind, the wretched matron feels thy piercing dart, thy sex's tyrant with a tiger's heart? What, though tremendous in the woodland chase, thy certain arrows pierce the savage race? How dares thy rashness on the powers divine employ those arms, or match thy force with mine? Learn hence no more unequal to wage, she said, and seized her wrists with eager rage. These in her left hand locked, her right untied. These in her left hand locked, her right untied the bow, the quiver, and its plumy pride. About her temples flies the busy bow. Now here, now there, she winds her from the blow. She wins her from the blow. The scattering arrows rattling from the case drop round and idly mark the dusty place. Swift from the field the baffled huntress flies, and scarce restrains the torrent in her eyes. So when the falcon wings her ways above, to the cleft cavern speeds the gentle dove. Not fated yet to die, there safe retreats, yet still her heart against the marble beats. Now that was quite a difficult bit of poetry there, I think, but to tell you what just happened there. So Poseidon and Apollo were fighting, And Apollo, seeing that Poseidon is his elder and the more mighty god, he says, no, I submit, I won't fight you. And then Artemis, the huntress godhead, who is really quite a fierce god, sees Apollo submitting against Poseidon and mocks him. You know, she says something, she's like, you can't fight Poseidon, you wuss. And then, before she can do anything, I think Juno or Hera comes up, the wife of Zeus, I think it is, and then comes up to her and says, you know, don't be so rude to your brothers, and then picks her up, you know, takes her bow, Artemis's bow, and starts whacking her with it, you know, and then sends her crying away. It's such a family story, that is. You know, even as immortals, they are literally, and then followed very much by. I'm going to type in it for the humour, and then followed immediately by that. Oh dear. What a very charming little bit there. I need to drink some water again. I'm running out of water. I love it when they like really humanize the gods. It's always so charming. Like I feel like, you know, in the modern age, when we think of, you know, deities and stuff, we're so used to these ultra mighty gods that people are terrified of. You know, like the Abrahamic god, and you know, the other Abrahamic god, and then you know, the sort of Hindu gods and stuff. And these terrifying things, you don't even dare look at them. You know, and then you see these stories here, and they're just like behaving like a silly family, a dysfunctional family. Although to be fair, I feel like with the Iliad, you see this you see different. There's a long history to the Greek gods, a long history. Their stories were written over 1,000 years. So, and society changes all the time in this. It seems during the time of Homer, or maybe not during the time of Homer, but long ago, things were pretty rough, and perhaps people didn't have too much faith in the gods. The gods here are not very nice. They don't like humanity very much at all. They're really quite upset. You see this sort of further extended in some of the plays I've read before. I think, you know, where the gods are really, they're not there to help you at all. They merely represent the cruel nature of the universe. However, you see the complete opposite of this in other stories where the Greeks are quite generous. And then, once you get to Aristophanes, suddenly the gods are jokes. There's a play called The Frogs by Aristophanes where the god Dionysus, who at this point is just a simple wine god, but really he is a mighty god. He is this god of madness and you know, chaos, essentially. He's like an opposite to Apollo. And this guy here, he writes a play of Dionysus getting spanked and told to kill himself by Heracles. Yeah, it's an amusing story. You know, he dresses up as a slave and tries to woo a woman and all kinds of silly stuff. It's interesting how over the course of history, at various points, they treat the gods differently. Alright, back to the story. Alright, so Artemis has just ran away crying. To her Latona hastes with tender care, whom Hermes viewing thus declines the war. How shall I face the dame who gives delight to him who thunders blacken heaven with night? Go, matchless goddess, triumph in the skies, and boast my conquest while I yield the prize. He spoke and passed, Latonia stooping low, collects the scattered shafts and fallen bow. So at this point, Hermes is like, no, I'm not even bothering with that. You win, whatever. I mean, he's going to go do whatever Hermes does. He spoke and passed, Latona's stooping low, collects the scattered shafts and fallen bow, that glittering on the dust lay here and there, dishonoured relics of Diana's war. Then swift pursued her to her blessed abode, where, all confused, she sought the sovereign god. Weeping, she grasped his knees, the ambrosial vest, shook with her sighs and panted on her breast. The sire superior smiled, and bade her show what heavenly hand had caused her daughter's woe. Abashed, she names his own imperial spouse, and the pale crescent fades upon her brows. Thus they above, while swiftly gliding down, Apollo enters Ilion's sacred town. The guardian god now trembled for her wall, and feared the Greeks, though fate forbade her fall. Back to Olympus, from the war's alarms, return the shining bands of gods in arms. Some proud in triumph, some with rage on fire, and take their thrones around the ethereal sire. Through blood, through death, Achilles still proceeds. We're back to Achilles. Over slaughtered heroes and over rolling steeds, as when avenging flames with fury driven on guilty towns exert the wrath of heaven. The pale inhabitants, some fall, some fly, and the red vapours purple all the sky. So raged Achilles, death and dire dismay, and toils and terror filled the dreadful day. High on a turret hoary Priam stands, and marks the waste of his destructive hands. Views from his arms the Trojans' scattered flight, and the near hero rising on his sight. No stop, no check, no aid, with feeble pace and settled sorrow on his aged face. Fast as he could, he sighing quits the walls, and thus descending on the gods he calls. You, to whose care our city gates belong, set wide your portals to the flying throng. For lo, he comes with unresisted sway, he comes, and desolation marks his way. But when within the walls our troops take breath, lock fast the brazen bars and shut out death. Thus charged the reverend monarch, wide were the opening folds, the sounding hinges rung. Phobos rushed forth, the flying bands to meet. Struck slaughter back and covered the retreat. On heaps the Trojans crowd to gain the gate, and gladsome see their last escape from fate. Thither all, parched with thirst, a heartless train, hoary with dust, they beat the hollow plain, and gasping, panting, fainting, labour on, with heavier strides that lengthen towered the town. Enraged Achilles follows with his spear, wild with revenge, insatiable of war. Then had the Greeks eternal praise acquired, and Troy inglorious to her walls retired. But he, the god who darts ethereal flame, talking of Apollo, shot down to save her and redeem her fame. To young Aegina force divine he gave, Antenor's offspring, haughty, bold, and brave. In aid of him, beside the beach he sat, and wrapped in clouds restrained the hand of fate. When now the generous youth Achilles spies, thick beats his heart, the troubled motions rise. So o'er the storm the waters heave and roll, he stops and questions thus his mighty soul. What? Shall I fly this terror of the plain, like others fly, and be like others slain? Vain hope, to shun him by the self-same road, yon line of slaughtered Trojans lately trod. No, with the common heap I scorn to fall. What if they passed me to the Trojan wall, while I decline to yonder path that leads to Ida's forests and surrounding shades? So may I reach, concealed, the cooling flood, from my tired body wash the dirt and blood. As soon as night her dusky veil extends, return in safety to my Trojan friends. What if? But wherefore all this vain debate? Stand I to doubt within the reach of fate? Even now, perhaps, ere yet I turn the wall, the fierce Achilles sees me, and I fall. Such is his swiftness, 'tis in vain to fly, and such his valour, that who stands must die. However, 'tis better fighting for the state, here and in public view, to meet my fate. Yet sure too he is yet sure he too is mortal. He may feel, like all the sons of earth, the force of steel. One only soul informs that dreadful frame, and Jove's sole favour gives him all this frame. He said, and stood collected in his might, and all his beating bosom claimed the fight. So from the deep-grown wood a panther starts, roused from his thicket by a storm of darts. Untaught to fear or fly, he hears the sounds of shouting hunters and of clamorous hounds. Though struck, though wounded, scarce perceives the pain, and the barbed javelin stings his breast in vain. On the whole war, untamed the savage flies, and tears his hunter, or beneath him dies. Not less resolved Antenor's valiant heir confronts Achilles and awaits the war. Disdainful of retreat, high held before his shield, a broad circumference he bore, then graceful as he stood, in act to throw the lifted javelin, thus bespoke the foe. How proud Achilles glories in his fame, and hopes this day to sink the Trojan name. Beneath her ruins, know that hope is vain. 1,000 woes, 1,000 toils remain. Parents and children at just arms employ, and strong and many are the sons of Troy. Great as thou art, even thou mayest stain with gore these Phrygian fields and press the foreign shore. He said, with matchless force the javelin flung, smote on his knees the hollow cuishes rung. Beneath the pointed steel, but safe from harms, he stands impassive in the ethereal arms. Then fiercely rushing on the daring foe, his lifted arm prepares the fatal blow. But jealous of his fame, Apollo shrouds the godlike Trojan in a veil of clouds. Safe from pursuit, and shut from mortal view, dismissed with fame, the favoured youth withdrew. Meanwhile the god, to cover their escape, assumes Agenor's habit, voice and shape. Flies from the furious chief in this disguise. The furious chief still follows where he flies. Now over the fields they stretch with lengthened strides, now urge the course where swift Scamander glides. The god, now distant, scarce a stride before, tempt his pursuit and wheels about the shore, while all the flying troops their speed employ, and pours on heaps into the walls of Troy. No stop, no stay, no thought to ask or tell, who escaped by flight, and who by battle fell. 'Twas tumults all, and violence of flight, and sudden joy confused and mixed affright. Pale Troy against Achilles shuts her gate, and nations breathe, delivered from their fate. And that is the end of the chapter. That was a very good chapter. But the next chapter is the chapter. I'm going to read the summary. Book 21, the death of Hector. The Trojans being safe within the walls, Hector only stays to oppose Achilles. Priam is struck at his approach and tries to persuade his son to re-enter the town. Hecuba joins her entreaties, but in vain. Hector consults within himself what measures to take, but at the advance of Achilles, his resolution fails him, and he flies. Achilles pursues him thrice around the walls of Troy. The gods debate concerning the fate of Hector. At length Minerva descends to the aid of Achilles. She deludes Hector in the shape of Deiphobus. He stands the combat and is slain. Achilles drags the dead body at his chariot. In the sight of Priam and Hecuba, their lamentations, tears and despair, their cries reach the ears of Andromache, who, ignorant of this, was retired into the inner part of the palace. She mounts up top to the walls and beholds her dead husband. She swoons at the spectacle, her excess of grief and lamentation. The 30th day still continues. The scene lies under the walls and battlements of Troy. That is the chapter, the chapter of the whole story, which we'll have to read for another time. It was a good stream, good bit of fun. There's only 2 people watching, so I won't bother you with a raid. We'll call that an end there, and thanks for watching. This is one of my favourite chapters, and this painting here is one of my favourite depictions of the Iliad. It is such energy. Look at the size of that javelin. That is like, let's see, 6. That's like 13 foot long. That is a big spear. You know, and how the rage of Achilles through, you know, fighting against a literal river. And then even the drama where, despite this immortal rage, he still is ultimately overwhelmed by the river and requires the gods to come and help him. And that the gods in that, they then start fighting amongst themselves. What a mayhem. What a chapter. The chapters like this is why the Iliad is as famed as it is. You just can't get better than this. Absolute masterpiece. Well, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for the death of Hector. Big chapter, the main chapter. Alrighty, see you later.